Hello, welcome back. It's been so long since my last update. It's day 262, and if you've looked at the video title, you can see that this video spans more days than any other update I've ever posted for any plant growing series on my channel. That's because I've been through a very long and frustrating period with this plant, but ultimately, as you can guess from the thumbnail, it came back. So right now on day 275, I'm just adding more 75% sand, 25% filtered clay soil, because this mixture tends to compact. So when I first used it for all my plants, I didn't realize this, how much it would compact by. In some cases it compacts by almost 2 inches in the pot over time after successive waterings. So then the entire plant sinks, but for my purposes, I just want to keep things, keep the soil volume to a respectable level. So this might reduce the amount I can water by, but I think this is generally good for the plant. So on day 310, I noticed the transplant from last time really shocked this plant. I chopped away 2/3 of the root system, if you'll remember, in that tube, and there's no growth. There's a lot of webs. So I never really understand what these webs are about, because I can't really tell whether they're from spider mites or real spiders. I never see the real spiders though. So I think those are from spider mites. So on day 435, I'm showing you that I moved. That's my new scenery. And nothing has changed about this plant. So I'm just going to water it like I always do. I've been watering very sparingly, and I don't film very often because there's no progress. So in times past, when there was no progress for a really long time, usually that meant my plant had died and withered away, so I would just eventually just throw it away. And sometimes I would make a finale episode in more recent times, but oftentimes in the beginning of my channel I would just discontinue the series because it wasn't worth it. Nobody would want to watch anyway for something that failed horribly. So I started doing some fertilization because it proved to be so effective for all my other plants, and because this balcony hasn't received direct sunlight since I've been here. It's been over a month. I decided that I had to compensate by fertilizing. So 1 pinch of crushed multivitamin powder for micronutrients that the Miracle-Gro all-purpose plant food doesn't have. The Miracle-Gro composition actually changed over time. It used to just have nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, I believe, and almost none of the micronutrients. So in either case, by adding the multivitamin crushed up into powder, I basically complement the Miracle-Gro, so the plant gets complete nutrition. You can still see some of the webs there. So on day 457, there's a new hope. So I was thinking, is the chemical fertilizer working? I better do this at regular intervals, because these plants are not receiving any sunlight, no direct light. And yeah, they pretty much only get a few thousand lux at most. Compare that to direct sunlight, which is 20,000 to 120,000. Generally 120,000 if you put a lux meter directly in the afternoon sun, is my experience. So on day 481, I'm doing a demonstration. I'm making sugar water 1 tablespoon per gallon, and this bottle only holds 1.5 liters, so I'll just add tap water to the 1 liter mark, pour out 3/4 of that, and then rehydrate it to, actually it has a fluid ounce mark, so that's what I'm actually using, the 32 fluid ounces. So sucrose is the form of photoassimilated carbon that plants use to transport their energy made in photosynthetic organs, mostly the leaves and stems, to sink organs in plants that don't photosynthesize, such as the root system. So the theory here is that I heard if you spray sugar water directly onto the foliage, it can be absorbed directly. And I've read that in foliar fertilizing, it's it's getting in through the stomata. So it's really the undersides of most leafy plants. With succulents, it's a little more tricky sometimes, the morphology. But they should be there, the stomata, the little openings in which gaseous exchange occur. So if you spray this all over your plant leaves, supposedly you can get 1,000-pound pumpkins this way. And it said you only need to do it every 2 weeks at this concentration of 1 tablespoon per gallon. So I thought this would be a very neat science experiment. It definitely has its risks. I do believe that if you spray concentrated solutes in solution onto plant leaves, especially the thin ones, you can burn them. But mango leaves are pretty tough. So on day 485, this is in the middle of the sugar water experiment. You can see the leaves have all this sugar residue on them, and they're not too sticky to the touch, although I imagine if this were to go on for a long time, they would get really sticky. But I'm seeing what I think might be leaf burns caused by this, which I didn't expect. And why would it be localized in this one area? Maybe the sugar is attracting mold or other dangerous microorganisms that can cause an infection and rot the leaf. So I know this is a little counterintuitive, but for a plant that's been in stasis for so long, I figured I'd give it a shot. But after about a week, 6 days, I decided it wasn't doing anything. So the next step for this plant was on day 493, I was going to do a transplant. It's currently in 75% sand, 25% filtered clay soil. It's draining too slowly. Maybe the roots need more oxygen. Maybe that's the way to go. So I decided to do an excavation, and going into this I knew pretty much that I might see zero root development after all this time. And it's been, at this point, I believe, several months, 6-7 months already. So this hasn't seen any growth since the end of the last episode, basically. So there's been zero root development since the transplant. Not surprised. That's the remains of the endosperm, long rotted away and detached. So you can see there's very little root development laterally, and maybe some of the stuff was broken off in there. So on this tub towards the bottom left, you could see even just 25% clay soil mixed with sand tends to form these mud bricks when it dries out. But you can break them if you apply some force, which is what I'm doing. So I'm going to mix all of this with an equal amount of sand. I use Quikrete Play Sand from Lowe's. It's about $7 a bag for 50 pounds. That's a pretty good deal, actually. Because if you were to go out there and try to get sand, it would take forever, and you'd spend gasoline and the whole day. So I learned from my pomegranate transplant always to keep the root system wet. I'm being really rough with it here. I'm just stabbing it in. And that's because I don't even have to worry about breaking anything off, because there's nothing to break off. Everything that could have been broken off is already broken off. So the final product here will be an approximate 90+% sand. It's a very sandy loam. So sand is 1/3 airspace. Sand greatly increases permeability versus clay. And when I say clay soil, it's really got a bit of sand and silt in there as well. So who knows what the actual clay percentage is in there. Maybe it's 30%, maybe it's 50%. I don't know. But it is quite heavy in many of the locales in Southern California, where I got this from, in North County, San Diego. So I'm mixing in more sand, and this very sandy loam probably won't ever form those mud bricks, no matter how dry it gets after being wetted. So I think this should provide for great permeability. Water and oxygen should be able to pass through it very freely, yet it's also a very heavy mixture, so the structure should be perfectly provided for the root system. So in these kinds of mixes, it's a very heavy substrate, so things just won't fall over unless they're meant to, such as vines or the pomegranate, which is kind of a creeping bush in its early form. So as you can see here, I'm applying a lot of force and it's not going in. And I thought maybe it would be easier to do dry, but then I realized maybe it's easier to do wet because I did manage to stick it into the existing soil mixture that it came out of that was wet. So first I'll just hydrate this with tap water, let it run through. And people often have this misperception that the water that I pour all the way to the rim just sits there and that I'm overwatering, but it's actually not the case. It just drains out within a few minutes. Remember, there are drainage holes for all of these dual trash can homemade pots, planters that I make. So after a few minutes it started going down, and then I decided to just stick this in, but it's actually a lot harder than it looks because the root, the taproot, or what's left of it, is kind of crooked as well. And I kind of have a perfectionist agenda when I do these things. I want to get it completely centered and be perfectly perpendicular to the ground and whatnot. Yet the balcony itself is slanted towards the drainage holes on the outside facing the sun. So it's often not that easy, and this thing, yeah, there was just no easy way to do it. I mean, maybe I could have wedged a big stick down there first, or a staff, and then plug this in. But in any case, I decided to let it sit a little bit higher than normal because I wanted it to have more room to grow downwards. And later on I can heap on more sand soil mixture if I want. So yeah, just in this time alone you can see how fast the water's drained. So I think that's pretty much it. I hope this does something, because if it doesn't, I've wasted a whole bunch of time. And I'm going to fertilize because it's worked so well for all of my other plants. Although I do run the risk of fertilizer burn. I feel like the upsides are huge. I've gotten some really big leaves and fast growth in many other plants with this. So I'm just going to do this one more time. I've been fertilizing about once a week since I started with all these plants after I moved to the new location. It's been quite a while and there still isn't any direct sun yet. And as you can always imagine, there's a ton of work that goes into these transplants. So it's always a last resort sort of thing. I don't do transplants lightly. I only do them unless I feel like there's a huge benefit. And here I'm just taking a spray bottle full of some tap water, and I'm just rinsing everything off because everything's all caked in mud and dirt. So I hope that will do something. So on day 504, I decided to revisit the sugar water claim. I'm looking for a definitive answer. So previously, a few weeks before this, I sprayed sugar water on all the leaves. And this time I'm taking a higher concentration, 4x the recommended concentration, 1 tablespoon per liter instead of per gallon. There's about 4 liters within a gallon. It's actually 3.78 or 79, I believe. So I'm taking the same amount of sugar and I'm dissolving it in just 1/4 of the volume. I didn't even need a spoon. I don't know why I got a spoon. And there's been no further development in the shoot apical meristem. As you can see, there's a little webbing between 2 of the shoots. So when your plant is in trouble and it's in stasis biologically and it's just not going anywhere, it does a lot of things like that depending on how well it's surviving or hanging on. But I figured by soaking the leaf ends here, some of these major older leaves from the first set and even the tip from the second set of 1 leaf, that if this doesn't do it, nothing will for this sugar trick, because this is direct immersion. So if nutrients and other things can get into the stomata, such as with fertilizers, foliar fertilizers, then it should work. But the next day I didn't observe any change. I don't know why this ant is here. I don't think this thing has extra floral nectaries. Maybe it gives off a sugar smell because the sugar's traveling into the vascular tissue of the plant and getting all the way up there. But as you can see, there's no leaf burns, so that's a relief. I was kind of worried about that and the aesthetic consequences. But these old leaves are really hanging on. Mango leaves are really tough. This leaf that's not immersed is kind of blackened, actually. And after 48 hours of soaking this group of leaves at the bottom in sucrose, nothing happens. So I think this is conclusive proof that sugar water applied to foliage does nothing. And I'm sure that foliar fertilizers out there that exist as industrial products, those have to be legit. They have to do something. So it's said that things getting into leaves is easier than watering it into the soil and having it disperse. So that takes care of that. I think that's pretty much over. And in today's 500 something, it was so hot. There was a huge brutal heat wave, and you can hear all the leaves shedding and the wood cracking in the background. It got all the way up to 109 to maybe 111 Fahrenheit, 43 Celsius. And you can see the leaves drooping down there. So I had to move the avocado indoors. It's 2020, September 6th. Summer months here in San Diego, Southern California, are generally August through October. And on hot days like that, I like to move everything out of the sun just to play it safe. So on day 552, I was really within a week of deciding to throw this thing away because it hadn't done anything for so long. I had done a transplant. I had tried immersing the leaves in sugar water. I had tried a fertilizing with Miracle-Gro and vitamins, and everything worked so well for all my other plants that I thought it had to work for this. But when I think about everything I did that's covered throughout this episode up until this point, I really think it's the transplant that did it, because the root system must obviously be taking off if the shoots are growing for real, but I have to see it to believe it. So the older leaves got sunburned just like my avocado leaves. After 4 months of darkness that happened, granted, this grew up in my old apartment where it got morning sun, direct sun, every day, even if it was just 4 hours max. I read that plant leaves can get adapted to full shade by doubling the amount of chlorophyll in their chloroplasts and also growing bigger. But these were mature leaves by the time they encountered these full shade conditions, so that's why I'm so surprised that they're burning right now in just maybe 2 or 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours at the most of direct sunlight per day. Maybe it's closer to 3. So I bought a new 4-gallon, 15-liter battery-powered backpack sprayer. I'm having a lot of fun with this toy, but in this perspective, I'm just using it to wash my plant leaves. You can use it to wash a lot of other things as well, wash the balcony, wash the car, etc. But this is a device that will enable me to wash the leaves efficiently. I could use distilled water to get rid of all the water spots and all that residual sugar. It took forever to get rid of that sugar, and just using a handheld spray bottle doesn't cut it. And it's all squeaky and annoying as well, so nobody likes that. So hopefully you'll like this a lot more. I had a lot of fun using this thing, and I don't have to pump or do anything. They're not cheap, but this is a very nifty tool for many applications that I see going to the future. It's day 556. I think this is for real. This is not something that's going to peter out after just a few days and not do anything for another 10 or 11 months. So yeah, I think this has been pretty much an 11-month stasis, and nothing happened really in those 11 months other than me trying every trick in my known book to get this thing to resurrect, and I think it's finally happened. So the shoot apical meristem got fried. It became all hard. I flicked off all the dead leaf ends, and in its place these 3 shoots, bumps appeared, and I was kind of doubtful and very cynical at that point. but after just a few days they started to really take off. So you can see the stems are longer here, they're turning red. It's a very beautiful new beginning. Mango plants are very beautiful. The foliage is just stunning. It's just red and then yellow, and then finally it settles into a lustrous waxy green. And the leaves are very tough, although you can see there are a lot of sort of burn marks and whatnot on some of these older leaves. I think some of this is just due to age. It may not be fertilizer burn, because that's not how fertilizer burn looks on all my other plants. Granted, the tips, yeah, that could be fertilizer burn, but it generally doesn't strike at just these spots in the middle. And maybe that could be due to pests, maybe that could be due to disease, or just the fact that the leaves are so old. But you can see the sunburn, it's there. This is a plant in which sunburn can actually look kind of good. I know it's horrible for the leaves, but the burn color is sort of like the plant's leaves when they're young, actually. But some of these other leaves have these black mottled spots. I don't know what that's about. I mean, really, it could be disease or anything. So I tapered back my fertilization scheme. It's sort of just like once every 2 weeks instead of once every week. On the Miracle Grow box, it does say you can do it once every 1 to 2 weeks, so this is not outside of the range. So just in case all that fertilizer is causing burn, I can scale back. So one of the new leaves is deformed. At this point I was really worried that everything would shrivel up and die, just like all those buds in the past. Although this has gone to a pretty advanced stage compared to all those fake outs from before. I don't think this is another head fake. I think this is, it's happening. It's beautiful red foliage before my eyes, and I think this plant is well on its way to recovering, and I really think it's due to the 90% sandy loam mixture, because none of the other things in my mind really produced a difference. The sugar didn't really do anything, and really it's the pot had trouble draining. But in the beginning this was in 50% sand, 50% filtered clay soil. Then I transplanted and cut off 2/3 of the taproot, the bottom 2/3, and put it into this 75% mix before finally getting into a 90% mix. So that leaf you just saw, that's the first developed leaf on this plant to be shed in this series. It's already day 571, so it took well over a year, almost 2 years, for this just to lose one leaf. I think that's a real testament to how tough mango leaves are. And you can see this is mostly in its yellow phase. There are some smaller leaves on top that are in the red phase. And this is actually my favorite phase. I think the best is yet to come, but this stage is quite short-lived. The red lasts for a long time. If you grow this indoors, they can become really long and floppy. But outdoors, maybe they develop a little bit faster under full natural direct sunlight. So you can see these old leaves have been some real champs, but they're quite burned at this point. And maybe they'll follow the lead of that one leaf that shed, and I'll lose many of these damaged leaves. But I don't think it matters at this point, because I've got so many new ones. There's got to be well over 10, maybe a dozen. And with 3 different branches coming off of this top spot from the sides of the burned apical meristem, I think I'll be getting a lot more leaves going into the future, and they're at a very acute angle, so I don't think the plant's going to tip over or anything. It's going to be well balanced. It's day 573. The yellow phase of leaf development is very, very beautiful, but it's ephemeral, so it's probably just going to last for this one day of really optimal yellow color, and then it'll be something that's more like yellow green. And of course, if there are cloudy days, then I won't get this great footage that I'm getting in direct sun. So this is way better than the LED panels at night. which you just saw in the previous clips. So I like to say that the mango leaf development scheme is sort of a reverse autumn color development scheme. It starts off red, then becomes yellow, then green. So that concludes an episode that spans almost 11 months. Thanks for watching, and please stay tuned for further updates.